Small Spaces, written by Katherine Arden and published by Penguin Press. Welcome back, warrior friends, to the third chapter in Small Spaces. When we left off at the end of chapter 2, Ole had come across a very unusual, sad woman who was crying next to the creek and ready to throw something into the water. And when Ole realized it was a book, she couldn't bear to see the book destroyed, so she swiped the book away from the woman. And as she was leaving with this book, the woman had an unusual thing to say to her. She said, "Stay away from small spaces." Let's read chapter 3 and see if we can find out why. Olivia Adler's house was tall and purple and old. Her dad had bought the house before he and her mom had ever met. The first time Ole's mom saw it, she said to Ole's dad, "Who are you? The Easter Bunny?" Because her dad had painted the whole house the color of an Easter egg, and ever since then they had called the house the Egg. The outside was plum-colored trim and a bright red door. The kitchen was green like mint ice cream, and the bedrooms were sunset orange and candy pink and fire red. Dad liked colors. "Why have a gray kitchen if you can have a green one?" he would ask. Ole loved her house. When her grandparents visited, they would always shake their heads and say how white walls really open up a space. Dad would nod agreeably and then wink at Ole when Grandma wasn't looking. Mom had given the room names. Dawn Room, Ole remembered her mom saying, holding her hand and walking her through the house and waiting while Ole's stumpy legs climbed the stairs. Ole must have just been learning to read, because she remembered looking up at a sign on the door and trying to sound out the word. D-A-W-N. Dawn. Her mother's hand was warm and strong and calloused from climbing and paddling. Ole could still remember the small, fat fingers secure in her mother's thin, brown ones. "That means when the sun comes up, Olivia." Ole's mom was the only one who called her Olivia. "If you have a brother, we're going to name him Sebastian. 2 beautiful names. Why make them shorter?" Mrs. Cuthers had tried to call Olivia at the end of 5th grade, and a few teachers had tried since, but Ole refused to answer. All the best heroines in Ole's books were stubborn as rocks or roots or whatever the author liked to call them. Only her mother called her Olivia. And that was that. "Dusk Room," Ole's mom said, tilting the sign on the door so that Ole could see it. She and her dad had painted the signs themselves. Dad's were perfect, with suns and moons and tiny flowers. Dad was crafty. He painted and knitted hats and baked. Ole's mom liked digging in the dirt and running and flying and adventurous things. Her signs were exuberant blobs of paint in which the letters were barely visible. "Dusk means when the sun goes down," Ole's voice piped in delightedly. "And this one," said Ole's mother at the end of the hallway. The door to this room had an old-fashioned keyhole and a doorknob shaped like a dragon. "Your mother found that old doorknob in some yard sale," her dad had told Ole once. "She had to have it. 'For my daughter,' she said." "Ole's room!" Ole cried triumphantly. Her mother had laughed and scooped her up and ran with her upside down all the way back to the kitchen. Ole had to pass the Brewster's house on her way home. During the day, the skeleton in their attic looked silly, but now at dusk, it looked sinister. Its lit-up green eyes seemed to follow her. The witch on the front porch grinned and cackled. Ole hurried past, trying not to look over her shoulder. "It's just a crazy person. I met a crazy person, that's all. That doesn't mean that I have to be scared of everything now. Come on." "And stole something from that crazy person," another part of her replied. "They put people in the slammer for stealing stuff. Juvenile detention. You'll have to graduate high school and in prison pajamas. It was easier thinking that than the other thought. What if she knocks on the door at midnight with that same look in her eyes, wanting her book back? Ole heaved her bike into the tool shed and clattered through the front door. The streaky shadows on the lawn seemed to chase her indoors. The weather was changing. The wind that had rattled the leaves by the swimming hole were now tearing down the mountains and swinging arcs of sunset shadows across the egg. Rain began to spatter on the driveway. The warm weather was over. But inside the egg, everything was bright and normal. Ole hung her jacket on its peg, her pocket heavy with the weight of her prize. She reached for the book and then thought better of it. If she didn't show anyone, she could always deny taking it. Would anyone believe her? Would they believe the woman by the river? Her dad was in the kitchen. Simon and Garfunkel crooned from the speakers, and accompanied by the clanking of pots. Over the music, her dad called, "That you, Ole?" "Nope," said Ole, still a little shaky. "It's the postman. Someone sent me a puppy, a kitten, and a pony for my birthday." "Great," came her dad's voice from the kitchen. "The pony can mow the lawn, and I will personally feed the kitten to Mrs. Who." Dad didn't like cats. Mrs. Who was the great horned owl that lived in the dead hickory tree at the far corner of their yard. "But you can keep the puppy," her dad added with a little air of generosity. "Although I thought your birthday was in April." "Ha ha," said Ole. She crossed the slate floor of the entryway and edged around the piano and stepped into the living room. As she did, some of the afternoon's weirdness started to lose its grip. Ole's dad sold people solar panels. He liked it fine, but what he really loved was making things. Ole had never seen his hands still, not since she was a baby. In the long summer afternoons, he built birdhouses or furniture. In the evenings, he cooked or knitted or showed her how to make plates out of clay. But that evening, her dad was baking, and the whole house smelled like bread. Ole sniffed. Garlic bread. There was tomato sauce, and Dad, seeing her come in, had just dumped a pile of noodles into a pot of boiling water. Spaghetti. Great, she was starving. The living room and the kitchen were one big space with a kitchen island separating them. Ole dropped her backpack and threw herself backwards over the couch. Ole's dad stood behind the kitchen island staring and humming along with the music. His shirt was long-sleeved and mustard-colored. Dad liked colors on his clothes, like he liked colors on his house. The brighter, the better, and sometimes they didn't go together. Mom teased him for it. Now, ordinarily, her dad would have handed her a piece of garlic bread while Ole ate it. They would argue over her drinking a ginger ale before dinner, and by the time she had worn him down, the pasta would have been ready. And it wouldn't be a before dinner anymore. But now her dad's expression had turned serious, and the garlic bread stayed on the stove. Ole thought about staging an oven raid, but then thought better of it. She surveyed her dad upside down. It was possible the school hadn't called. Her dad pressed pause on the Simon and Garfunkel song. "Ole, the school called," said Ole. "Brian Battersby's mother called me first." "And her dad," said her dad. He couldn't maintain angry dad voice even when he was trying. Now he just sounded exasperated. "I got an earful, let me tell you. And then the school called. You have to go to the principal tomorrow, Ole. You really could have hurt that boy." "No, I couldn't," said Ole, sitting up. "It was only a tiny rock. Besides, they were being mean to Coco Zenter. You always told me I should stick up for people." Her dad quit stirring the sauce and he came and sat down beside her. Now he was going to be understanding. She hated understanding voice as much as she hated sympathy face. Ole felt her ears start to burn. Ole, he said, I'm really glad you were trying to help someone. But don't try that innocent face with me. There's about 1,000,000 ways to help a friend out without giving anyone stitches. As you know perfectly well, I don't care if Brian was being a little turd. Next time you get a teacher, you use words. Blind them with mathematics. God, use that imagination of yours. He knocked playfully on Ole's head. First thing tomorrow morning at the principal's office, young lady. You're going to be in detention for a while if Brian's mother has anything to say about it. He paused and added mildly, Brian's fine, by the way. His mother seemed to think he wasn't taking the incident as seriously as he should be. Of course he's not. His head is about 7 inches thick, grumbled Ole. I could have thrown a brick, and he would have been fine. Please don't, said her dad. As the caterpillar said to the blackbird, also, Coco Zenter's mother called. Coco says thanks for standing up to them. Apparently, no one else did. Ole said nothing. She felt bad about hitting Brian in the head with a rock, and also bad because she didn't really like Coco Zenter. Coco squeaked too much. Ole just didn't like watching someone get teased. She was also hungry, and she wanted to tell her dad about the woman beside the swimming hole, but it didn't seem like the right time. She did not want to be in detention until Christmas. Well, Ole thought, if they put me in jail for stealing a book, I won't be. But that was hardly better. Out of the frying pan and into the fire. If you want to throw things, her dad said quietly, why don't you just rejoin the softball team? They'd take you back in a heartbeat. I know, Slugger. Remember your home run last? She stiffened. Don't want to. Her dad stood up. He didn't look mad or exasperated. He just looked hurt, which was sort of worst of all. Okay, fine, he said, heading back towards the stove. You don't have to, but Ole, you can't hide in your books forever. There are all kinds of people and good things in life just waiting for you to... She had known he was going to say that or something like that, and she was on her feet. To what? Forget? I won't, even if you have. I don't want to. You're not the boss of me. I am the dad of you, her dad pointed out. He had gone pale under his beard. I'm just trying to help, kiddo. I'm sad too, but She didn't want to hear it. All of the things in the world. It was the last thing that she wanted to hear. I'm not hungry, said Ole. I'm going to bed. Ole? Not hungry. She grabbed her backpack and she made for the stairs in the entryway, scooped up her prize from the swimming hole in passing. The stairs were steep and the hallway to her room was long and full of shadows. She sped down it. I'm going to pause our story right here. Chapter 3 is a rather long chapter. So what we've just listened to, we're going to call Chapter 3A. And we'll pick up Chapter 3B in our next video. And at that time, we'll find out what Ole does when she gets to her room. She's clearly upset with her day and her dad.